good morning, and thank you for joining us in the parallel track on smart cities. This is an exciting topic to chair, and I'm even more excited that this will happen through some phenomenal contributor and player in the field of smart cities. And I think I will briefly now introduce them, but I'd like to provide you with a bit of a context about why this session is important for us. We do live in exceptional time where most of the economic value of our society has shifted from nation state or the principle of organized institutions around a country to what we call the principle of functional geography. So most of the GDP of the world has now shifted in the hands of cities. We have the rise of what we call urban archipelagos. There are about 50 cities in the world. They're going to actually own most of the wealth of the world. And we see also in the political spectrum how much differentiation we have on a city versus the rest of the country. It happens in this side of the world. It happens in North America. It happens in emerging economies. So we clearly have the rise of an entirely different paradigm. Just to give you some numbers, right, just as a point of reference. If you're looking at, for example, a country like the US, a third of the GDP is concentrated in the corridor between Boston and Washington, D.C., and in the string between San Francisco and Los Angeles. If you go into London, London is a bit less than 40% of the UK GDP. If you go into Istanbul, Istanbul is about 60% of the Turkish GDP. If you go into Tokyo and Osaka, it's about 80% of Japan's GDP. There is no Japan outside of Tokyo and Osaka. Nigeria is a suburb of Lagos. In fact, Lagos is the largest contributor to the Nigerian and Ghanaian economy. If you guys go to Johannesburg, it's half of the GDP of South Africa. If you go to Russia, Moscow has a GDP per capita of $44,000 per capita, and the rest of the country is 17. So there are two different microclimates. So the world is really shifting more and more towards the empowerment of cities. On one hand, cities, they are part of the global economy. They understand integrated supply chains, and they tend to be part of this multilateral view on everything: policy, development, growth, social progress. But the rest of the world is not necessarily following the same trend. So we have been seeing more and more of a possible divide between how cities are versus the rest of the countries. The session of today really tries to understand when a city is becoming a smart city, when a city is aspiring to go to a smart city model, when a city is walking the talk. What do they do? How do they think about this? What is their primary modus operandi? What is their thinking behind? And so we're going to do this in a phenomenal panel, and I'm going to tell you why. So first of all, we're going to start with Wolfgang Mueller, who is the Chief Executive Director, Deputy of the City of Vienna, which is the city that is hosting us right now. I think we all feel when we come to Vienna that this city has started a journey of preserving the historical heritage, but it's also a city of modernity, culture, arts, and we feel extremely comfortable in a city that is modern, but is also bridging us towards the future. Then we're going to take the experience of Ying, who is also known as Lulu. She is actually Finnish, but actually from Chinese parents, and currently living the last 3.5 years in Shanghai. So I met Lulu during a global Shaper event in Shanghai organized by her about the future of urban living, which is also one of the companies that she's currently running and curating, is really what does it mean for a city like Shanghai to go into the smart city model. Then we're going to go into one of the success stories that we actually have in this side of the world. We're going to go to Portugal, and specifically with Luís Newton, we're going to have a conversation about one of the boroughs in Lisbon. You guys know Lisbon has become now renowned for being a smart city, an incubator for startups. There's a lot of investment coming to the city. It's one of the cities that has a great rush of renewable energy. So what is Lisbon doing? And then Luís will tell us maybe more specifically about his district that is really shifting over there. And we're going to finish with a more macro perspective with Mikko from Finland, president of Sitra, who's talking about really at the macro level what it is like to think of a framework or reference for a city to become smart. And that will give us a lot of conversation to start with, so that then we can have a question and answer part that will be the part we all as speakers look forward to. As it's a bit of a smaller room than the one upstairs, we'll be able to run it in the old-fashioned with a microphone, you asking questions, so that we can have a conversation rather than a digital identity through the screen. And I look forward to the part two. As you know, we are on a schedule for every single speaker. So I would invite Wolfgang from the city of Vienna to start. And then we'll try to collect as many information as possible from our speakers so that we can have a lively discussion before our time is up. But one more time, welcome to this session. It's an honor for us to actually spend this hour with you. So, Wolfgang, we'd like to maybe start with the city of Vienna. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Vienna again. I'm not a professor, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a politician. I'm chief operations. What we are doing is just running a city, operating. Yesterday I learned it's all about questions. Questions are the answers. So I want to start with questions. What makes a city really smart? Does a sensor make a city smart? Or is it the other way around? Does a city make a sensor smart? Or is a city smart when its citizens are empowered and their human potential is unleashed, supported by technology? Smart city programs are often merely understood as technology engines, implementing sensors on everything, everywhere. And what is the overall goal? Technology for technology's sake? Vienna has a very clear answer. Vienna was declared the city with the best quality of living already many times. By Mercer, 9 times in a row, and recently by The Economist. So it's quite okay to live here. Go outside, look around, make up your mind. And if you have complaints, please tell me personally. I'm the person. I will fix it. Ladies and gentlemen, from our point of view, it is not enough to offer the best living conditions to some people, like those ones who can afford everything. We want to do it for everyone. Top quality of living for everyone. This is our challenge. This is the goal of Vienna. Nobody shall be left behind. How do we do it? What is our plan? Our way is to combine traditional concepts, you know, Vienna is tradition, with digitalization. We believe that quality of living has a lot to do with the cost of living, with social security, and with healthcare services. In Vienna, for historical reasons, 1/4 of the citizens, 1 out of 4 citizens, lives in a flat owned by the city. They do this voluntarily. The standards are high when compared internationally. That helps a lot to stabilize the cost of living for the whole social system. We stopped that program of public housing in the 90s, and now we restarted it. Several thousands of flats, apartments are in the pipeline. Ladies and gentlemen, public housing in Vienna means being close to shops, schools, kindergartens, medical services, public transport, fitness centers, playgrounds, and sometimes you have a pool on the roof or nearby. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a very new concept, but it's done in a modern way, in a modern style, and it has to be done if you want to have quality for living for everybody. And it works even for the wealthy, because it improves the overall atmosphere and security. In our districts, there is a mixture of relatively poor people and relatively wealthy ones. Academics and white-collar workers living alongside with blue-collar workers. So we don't have poorer ghettos or slums. And this is one reason why we don't have no-go areas. In Vienna, you can go everywhere safely. If you find a place, again, please tell me. I will be there in the evening and start working. But ladies and gentlemen, this is very clear that this is not enough. We need a great deal of technology in the city. We need green mobility, smart infrastructure, a new digitalized e-government service, sensors and city lines, and so on and so on. Obviously, technology is a key to cities like Vienna. We need a digitalization. But technology has to work for the people and not the other way around. And how can we make sure that this is the case? In our opinion, as a prerequisite, the city staff has to deal with testing, learning, and selecting. We have to know how technology works. We have to become experts on digitalization. Just playing the role of a customer of big companies is not enough. So we decided to create a digital agenda, specific strategies on IoT and blockchain, and a new strategy in the pipeline now about artificial intelligence. And ladies and gentlemen, this all is done in a public process, accessible for everybody. Everybody can participate. Search of ideas, first draft, discussion, communication of results, co-created with the citizens. Done in a mixed online and offline process. Online and face-to-face. And they put several things on our agenda. They said, listen, this is very important for us. This has to be a priority. So it turned out that the senior citizens, the silver citizens, want to stay in their home as long as possible instead of going to those retirement homes, sometimes up into the 90s. We believe that you can stay at home up into your 90s. With technology, it is no problem. It will be possible. So we use intelligent assistants, tablets and smartwatches for activities, even infrared imaging for collapse recognition, and so on and so on. We are now testing in around 100 households everywhere in the city, and in 2019, the rollout will start. Ladies and gentlemen, collaboration is the new creed of innovation. But who are the experts of collaboration? Big corporations, industrial complexes, or maybe military intelligence? I guess it's the cities. Cities are engines of development. It is not the countryside that drives innovation. It's the cities and the citizens. Urban life for thousands of years would not have been possible without intense collaboration of the citizens. Thanks. We, the urban people, the urban dwellers, are used to that. So let us use our potential. And our experience is it works well. Collaboration is key in two ways. Within the cities participation, working together with the citizens, and also between the cities. Cities need to intensify their collaboration among themselves, working together on projects instead of merely exchanging experiences. In the future, I guess our children will require us to do more. It is not only the economy, it's rather the human dimension that will make the city and the planet smart. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think in an extremely interesting way, Wolfgang really finished in leading us towards the next stage, which is really about the human dimension. And the topic of the forum this year really tried to generate a nexus between technology, innovation, and the human-centered society. And our next speaker, Lulu, who is going to bring the experience of Shanghai, really has prepared her contribution to our conversation around the human aspect. So Lulu, I'd love for you to take us now over to the Asian conversation. I think it's fascinating when you're hearing from a city like Vienna, who is trying to redesign its role, considering the historical role the city has. But now we're going in a city where the growth has been exponential, and where maybe not necessarily easy to manage the human dimension. So up to you, Lulu, please.
Thank you. So thank you, Mark, panelists, audience. Before I start, can I have a quick raise of hands of those of you who are based in a megacity today? Megacity is a city that is more than 10 million people. Yeah, we have a few. We have a few. Okay, wow. That's good.
Wow.
So as of last year, 2017, 47 megacities in existence. And most of them are in China and in Asia. And when we speak about these things, I mean, cities are extremely complicated, complex, living and evolving organisms, right? I'm based in Shanghai. 24 million people officially registered. Unofficially, the number must be a lot higher. In the metropolitan area, we have 35 million people. And when we're looking at these kind of numbers, today, for the very first time in history, we have so much data about our cities that it really allows us to optimize resources and build digital layers or layers of completely new infrastructures that we haven't had before. So it allows us to optimize energy usage, energy distribution, food production, and which puzzles me and challenges me and fascinates me the most is human capacity, the most important resource of our urban areas. And if you take one thing from me today, I wish it would be this. It doesn't matter, we talk about smart cities a lot. For me, it doesn't matter how smart our cities are if, as an environment, it's not built to really nurture and maximize our human capacity and really maximize our urban potential. And when we talk about urban communities, it's easy to think that, okay, when we build a digital layer, then everything else will just happen naturally with that. But I believe that to unlock the future urban communities, future belongs to those environments that actually are able to really harness the enabling factors to do this. And these are usually the softer elements and the social fabrics that are hard to put in concrete layers. So to make a case, I'm going to deep dive a little bit deeper into Shanghai, where I'm based. Today, as said before, 24 million people, we have a fertility rate which is less than 1. It's ultra low, measured in any scale. At the same time, we have some of the longest life expectancy rates of the whole country. About 40% of our population today is urban migrants, meaning that we have a lot of older people, not enough young people, a lot of urban migrants, and the city relies on them in terms of workforce and source of innovation, Yet, due to China's very unique hukou policy, some of you may know, it's a social security policy that doesn't transfer with you when you migrate into another city, is something that hasn't fully been integrating these urban migrants. We're not maximizing our urban potential. And as cities, really, first-tier cities, Shanghai, Beijing, these workforces are such a big part of our urban infrastructure today, urban software infrastructure today. And when we look at these social fabrics, and what happens is that younger kids, elderly people of this workforce, labor, are left in rural areas. And they struggle to grow the same way as first-tier cities. So how do we solve this? How do we really maximize something that is this complex, right? This brings me to housing. And from my experience, from my work field, we've worked with tens of thousands of buildings, residential buildings. And over the past decades, we've really seen how China as a nation and cities have transformed their way of living. So just 3 generations, I talk about my grandparents, my parents, my generation, the living has gone from very collective lane housing living, where everything, everyone knows their neighbors, you don't lock the doors, kids are running in and out, sharing food, into these high-rise complexes, thousands of households, you don't know your neighbors. I used to live in 35th floor. Took me, if I went to the front gate and I forgot something, it would take me 20 minutes to go back up and all the way down, literally. So, better not to forget anything, huh? So we can ask, is this a livable environment in a mega city, right? Is this what we want to create? And from housing perspective, our living environment really shapes how we live, work, and socially behave. And in my work currently in future urban living, which Mark also referred to, we're really trying to use design thinking to tackle some of the really, really complex problems. Today, we have an environment where architect offices, they're still architects, engineering offices are engineers, and so forward. And what we really are trying to do here is bring multi-stakeholder collaborations, different angles, also user, which in this case would be the citizen, and we focus on the citizen experience, to really look at what can we do to harness that community, that human capacity power in here. And we like to play around with an idea called urban innovation pockets. And this is something that, as I'm saying, we're playing around with, we're brainstorming with. So to imagine a city to have agile, plug-in, plug-out urban cells or pockets, so to speak, where cities get to test different ideas and ways of living and arranging. And these can then iterate, we can modify them, we can innovate in there and change very quickly. Today, our spaces and everything we build are still very, very fixed. So this would be one of the ways that we're currently looking and designing if there are ways that we could maybe have a private social security system within these pockets. Maybe these pockets could move with you and your family when you're going into different cell areas. So something that we're really looking into. To close this, really not saying that housing or shaping our spaces alone could do anything to solve a problem this complex. But it's a point for me to say that when we're talking about smart cities today, a personal challenge and a worry is that this trend is very often now driven by private companies, from IT to automobile and so forth. And that's all really, really great. But just as a small reminder that at the core of all of this is human capacity. So how can we really harness and unlock that potential? But big problems present big opportunities. And for me to be here today and seeing all of us brainstorming this topic and talking about it already inspires me. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So fascinating to think about the concept that we really emerged from the conversation with Lulu, urban migrants, the urban immigrant innovation pockets, the application of innovation, design, and livelihood somehow to cities in a way that has some degree of transferability. These are ideas that are becoming quite cutting edge. And I think if you're looking at the spirit of the conversation so far, we went from the city of Vienna and the very strong emphasis from Wolfgang around operation, making this really practical so that you can really run the city, to the fact that there is a need for a design that has to be entrenched in the idea about what the city really is about. And this, we're talking about a relatively large city in their own proportional context. And now we're going to go to actually a borough, a district in Lisbon. From what I remember from Luís yesterday in the conversation, one of the 24th out of Lisbon, is it right? So we're going to go now into more of a microclimate, which is where Luís is the president of the borough, and understanding when the conversation on smart city goes to the territory, what does it really happen? So Luís, please, up to you.
So I'm gonna ask to dim the lights a little bit, please. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'll make a small teaser that will include a claim, a proof of concept, and a plea. Remember that in the beginning of civilization, there were no smart cities, but actually, it was rather smart to build cities and join people for common goals, for protection and security, and later, to defend these settlements, generated the first large population concentrations that thrived and grew economic prowess. And with these concentrations came the first dilemmas of city management. They seem settled by the Industrial Revolution that brought answers supported by early technology. And with it, new fears like the demise of man by technology, so well depicted in George Orwell's 1984 fiction. This actually saw the rise of techno-pessimists, people that feared technology. City challenges like economic development, public safety, pollution, traffic, waste, energy and water management, housing or public services are just the tip of what cities must deal with. But people still kept migrating to cities. By 2050, 68% of the world's population will live in cities. And to deal with this, once again, man is turning to technology. Instead of industrial cities, we started developing smart cities that offered the first solutions with clusters of sensors producing big data, often linked by the Internet of Things. So, why do people seem to fear the rise of technology? Does IoT resemble Terminator's Skynet? Actually, people remain techno-pessimists because they fear that technology develops itself without the need of man. But what for? In Estrela, we set on a journey that proves that the future lies in the path to a sentient city. We wanted to reach out to people, allowing them to report to us the issues that undermine their daily city life. With Estrela, they became the first warner of city problems, thus contributing to the common good. But if you know Maslow, you know that as soon as people secure their basic needs, they will want to go to the next level. In our case, they wanted to propose ideas for urban architecture, upgrading their environment. This goes beyond the concept of smart cities, because citizens are no longer just sensors, but actual public planners. They went from reactive to proactive. And in just 5 years, 35% of Estrela's population went digital. This confirms the prospect of communities coming together and contributing to the common good, as long as we keep delivering. So, what's next? To keep up with positive delivery and being able to evaluate and analyze quickly tons of big data, to come up with the best solutions at the same time that citizens keep climbing Maslow's pyramid, this will generate trillions of interactions. And to maintain adequate levels of deliverance, We must push for digital integration and acknowledge that artificial intelligence is the only way to do it. The path to a sentient city is a path where man plans, technology manages, and the city is built, a city that is a living entity. And how can we define a sentient city? The first pillar is citizen engagement, where he is a direct participant in city planning. The second is technology involvement, where an artificial intelligence manages urban issues. The third pillar is urban architecture, with integrated solutions to an efficient city development. And again, what is sentient? Sentient is conscious or self-aware. I came up too quickly to this one.
I'm gonna flip your switch! Good luck finding it! L3!
Let go of the mean man's face.
Technology can be sentient, but as Lando Calrissian just showed us, man will always be in charge. This is being techno-optimist and letting go of George Orwell's fears. We can achieve it if citizens are engaged, if policymakers are committed, and if investors are giving stable rules that boosts investment confidence, unleashing the human potential. This is my plea to local governments. You have to unleash the human potential, empower your citizens. And sentient cities will definitely be the future for more humane cities.
I'll be back.
Thank you.
So, Luís, thank you very much for this visual journey. You really make feel all of my PowerPoint really bad in comparison to this, you know. So I have to do a little bit of redesigning of it just to make it so attractive to the audience. So thank you for this. I think we're learning new words as from sentient to techno-optimist and techno-pessimist. I think this is quite interesting. And I think you leave us with a natural question that I will need the help of Mikko to answer. Now that we have been exposed to the good practices, the good example, the opportunities, so how do we build a framework or reference? For now, whoever would like to go to the next level or like try to think about this as a real serious application of the conversation we had. So I'm going to ask Mikko to help me with this conversation on the framework, Mikko, and then we're going to be able to have some time for the discussion, which is what will make it even more lively. Please, Mikko.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, if I may say. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of the Finnish experiences in developing smart, and I learned just a new word, sentient human societies, with the help of citizen engagement and artificial intelligence. I come from Sitra, which is the Finnish Innovation Fund, a societal change agent, an independent think and do tank directly under the parliament. We are dealing with healthcare reform, circular economy, lifelong learning, but also digitalizing society and making it more human-centric. So my main message this morning is that all those cities play an important role in creating human-centric societies. That's not enough. In order to scale human-centric activities to national and global level, we need more. So let me start by describing how we are in Finland developing personal and individualized predictive kind of public services together with the citizens. We call our national AI-enabled kind of user interface Aurora Virtual Assistant. And its basic architecture looks like this. It consists of 4 layers. The sources of information from individuals, public, and other entities at the bottom. Then we have the peer-to-peer AI network. Then the service processes based on life and business events. And we have currently now in 5 cities some 5 different live events experiments ongoing, which we are developing in local ecosystems. And the virtual assistant Aurora is then providing these services, and of course, since it's based on your personal data, my data, it learns about you all the time more, so it can provide you more and more predictive services, not just individual, but also predictive services, human services, pulling together all the different kind of the data from different sources. And of course, now the most important thing here is that in order for this layered architecture to work, we need laws, and we need new standards. And for moving the individual my data from one source to another in a safe way. And the law we all know we have already in Europe, not elsewhere in the world. So we have GDPR, which we need to turn into an advantage, an enabler, not just a constraint. But we don't yet have the standard in place for moving individual my data across different stakeholders with the permission of an individual, because we all own our own data. But we have a good example of the standard for moving personal data, and that's the IBAN standard in the financial sector. You remember when the European Commission established the SEPA standard, Single European Payment Account System, the banking industry then created the IBAN standard. Now my organization Sitra is together with many partners at the European level. We are driving a so-called IHAN, International Human Account Number Standard, in order for individuals with their permission to manage their own data in a flexible and safe way, like we are already transferring our financial transactions in a safe way. This could provide Europe a fantastic opportunity for growing new businesses because currently we have only two models for the data economy. We have the US model where the GAFA companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon are kind of gathering all the data from us. Then we have the Asian Chinese model where the government, the state, knows everything about you. We in Europe need to fight for kind of us owning our own data. It's the foundation of democracy, and it's a source of new business building and opportunities. So that's what we are doing. So that's a kind of an enabler for this construct to work. But in Finland, we are now working, as I said, on local level, developing these solutions in different life events, and the IHAN standard will then give us the permission to move the data from the different sources and combining the data on our permissions to develop new services. And this is what we do. But this is not enough at the national level. So what we are also doing in Finland is that we have created a national ecosystem forum hosted by the Prime Minister's office to enable interoperability and seamless services. So the idea is that this ecosystem forum is accelerating the development of these local ecosystems and removing obstacles and escalating problems to the highest level when need be, because we want to transform the society from top-down production-based system where the ministries and agencies push services to you, whether you need them or not, and to pull-based individual predictive kind of services. And this, of course, turns the whole way of working in the nation state and in cities completely other way around. So it's pull-driven, base-driven, and based on your own needs. And this is what we are doing in Finland. So to summarize, as a result, new human-centric operating models gradually then replace these traditional public sector silo organizations and the age-old separation between public and private sector at all levels, local, regional, and national. But for this, we need the standards. We already have the law, GDPR, and as I said in the beginning, cities play an important role because the activities, the experiments take on city level. But in order to scale them up, you need some national coordination and support to accelerate the development, solve problems, and you need to globalize this, hopefully globalize, at least make it European-wide. With the GDPR, you can make this a fantastic opportunity. My previous life was at Nokia. I was playing. We succeeded in making GSM standard, and the rest is history. I mean, we created a standard in the Nordics first, then in Europe, which then kind of penetrated to the rest of the world. Now, with this IHAN standard, we believe we can provide and create Europe a new competitive advantage, which is really kind of human-centric. Different from that of the Asian model or a US model. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikko. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been fascinating to go through the contribution of our speaker. Just really 30 seconds like reflection with you. So first of all, of a panel of 4, we had an emphasis on the European model. We had the example of what the framework is like in Finland, the example of Vienna, and of course Portugal. It makes you see more and more how technology can become a force of equalization. And in the European Union, we now know this convergence much more than divergence. And this is now possible because cities can learn from each other. They can transfer the model. And even in the example of Shanghai, where Lulu is active in the urban living, well, she's Finnish. So it shows you that there is a heritage of how Europeans have been able to understand the whole idea about cities in a way that is becoming almost like a sense of advocacy around the world. So I think it's really fascinating. A few key words that I really wrote for myself. We have heard from Mikko about also the fact that circular economy is becoming a predominant force of the dialogue and the conversation and the whole conversation around what do we do with end-of-life product and waste. We have really seen that when techno-optimism is in place, there is really more and more gap that tends to be closer, and we tend to decrease the divide. But I think it's very clear that although we have odds, because we have to manage the possible controversy that comes with technology, when technology is designed for maximizing human well-being, the first recipient of that specific paradigm are cities, because that's where really you have in the implementation of the idea. I think we have, with good luck, about 15 minutes for a conversation with you, which, considering the fact that you have so many different panels and so many different content, is actually great to have a quarter of our time spent with you with your question. So the way it will work is that the microphone is walking around. So we'd love to hear your questions and get, a lively discussion with our speakers.
My name is Karen Levin. I'm the Director of Planning at the City of Vancouver, and I have a question for Luís. Of course, we've seen an explosion in public engagement and stakeholder engagement over the last decade, say, and then, of course, social media coming in from all angles. My question is, there's 2 tensions that I don't think we've resolved yet at our city. I'm curious your thoughts on them. The first one is proactive management versus reacting to the moment, the message of the moment, whatever the public's telling us through whatever channel, whether it's our pull out through an engagement process or any number of things on our phones. And the second tension I see is between relatively small special interest groups, frankly, having too large an unrepresentative voice, at least in some of our opinion, and how you level that playing field, because I think there's a whole bunch of people who are just busy doing their jobs and raising their kids who aren't coming out to our meetings and really aren't being represented in non-representative engagement processes. Thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting, the fact the tension, right? It's I grew up in Montreal, so so maybe Luís, on this idea about proactive and reactive,
you want me to answer?
Yeah, I think you were addressing this to Luís, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's the issue here, the proactive versus the reactive aspect of, I would have to say, the internal organization that a local government must deal with. And the answer sometimes is actually, well, it's an internal one. What we have to do is, and what we've been doing, is we have to shift the way that our organizations work, because they are mostly centered on the processes that lead to solutions and not centered on the needs of the people. For instance, going digital allows us to go straight from the citizen to the solution itself. This is only possible if our own organization is set to adequately respond to the citizen and not enter into a bureaucratic state of chain of solutions and internal processing, etc. And this is what we've been doing. We've been channeling all of the digital interaction straight from the citizens to the way services and planners respond to those needs. And that leads us, in fact, to the second question that you spoke of. The small groups that usually take a lot of voice and put out a lot of voice, but are actually not representative. But that's where local governments also have to kick in, because this is not done without the participation of the local governments itself. You have to have a mayor, you have to have councillors that are sensitive and that they can filter what is actually a minority or a necessity or what is actually something that grows bigger than that. And again, machines don't work by themselves. Technology doesn't work by itself. You have to have, at the same time that you have citizens, people that are elected and city employees, they should also be stakeholders, and they should also filter what is actually most relevant and what is not.
Please,
may I
Mikko,
comment? I mean, one experience sharing with you from Finland. We created 3 years ago a so-called Smart and Clean Metropolitan Helsinki Area Foundation. Exactly for that reason, we have a project where we have 5 different nearby cities participating, and of course they all have their own very kind of siloed organization concentrating only on their own matters. Now, this foundation has a governance model where we have citizens involved, we have the mayors, we have the main corporate leaders, small and small, everybody, multi-stakeholder governance, and it creates, it's a solution-driven kind of foundation, and it has amazingly changed, and in fact, the kind of the traditional, in a way, changed the traditional organizations, because they now see that the citizens really need and want these solutions, and these solutions typically cut across the different silos in the city organization. But we needed to kind of create this foundation that consists of multi-stakeholders on top of almost like the city structures. But you need both, because, as you said, you need the kind of the mandates, the official mandates from the politically elected people have to be there. But if you only leave it there, nothing happens.
Very interesting also in terms of... sure, please, Luís, yes.
Very shortly, I mean, key here is sentient is tech, of course, but it's also empowering all human stakeholders, not just the ones that, not just the public, but those that are elected by the public. They cannot be or diminish their relevance and their participation in finding the solutions.
I think where we learned yesterday as a recurrent topic of our conference was the fact of purpose, and we were trying to apply this to organizations, but it's not different when we think about whether cities can define the degree of purpose or engagement. One of my friend and colleague, which is Dan Ariely, who is renowned in the world for the work on behavioral economics, he always reminds me that when people are driven by the right purpose, social conformity and norming really happens. So how can we use technology and communities, in this case the small group interest, to really generate that degree of social conformity so that it's becoming a behavioral manifestation? We really generate the sense of I belong to this city regardless of where I originally come from, which is fascinating. Because Wolfgang is in the operation of the city of Vienna, I think on your first question, which is a question that so like attaches many of our interests, Wolfgang, when you're hearing proactive and reactive, and since you are running the operation of the city, so how do you deal with the fact that certain things can be planned, but many things sometimes just happen? So what is the modus operandi of the city of Vienna on this?
Well, first of all, we are not scared of the people.
Exactly.
You're laughing, but in fact,
Many
bureaucracies have the tendency
Yeah.
to be scared of the people. And if you work for a city, it's the other way around. If you have to talk to managers, you talk to managers. You have to talk to craftsmen, you talk to craftsmen. If you have to talk to prostitutes, you will talk to prostitutes. This is normal in the city. And on the other perspective, you have to say that people are very skeptical. You have to earn the trust. Well, we did this procedure with the digital agenda, and the ideas came in, and then we decided to invite everybody that had an idea, just for a talk, open space. Several hundred people, and someone was raising his hand, and he said, listen, this is a fake. There is no idea coming from a citizen. This is a play in a theater. So what did we do? We say, okay, please, everybody that has brought in an idea or emotion, raise your hand. And 90% raised their hand. And that was the breakthrough. Wow. And out of that, a community was growing. In the meantime, about more than 1,000 people. They are our testing community. If we are editing a new application, what we did 2 days ago, they are asked to test it. But everybody can test it. We are not scared.
Yes. It's fascinating to hear how city are using the language that in business we've been having for so long, minimal viable product, pilots, testing. This is really a new fresh air, right, that we see this. I think we have time for at least another question, sir. I think.
Sorry. You can go in a minute.
Why don't we collect the two questions so that we make sure that we can cover both? Right?
My name is Daniel van Drik. I work in the mobility space, and I would be, to make it a bit more tangible and specific, I mean, traffic is one of the huge challenges for cities, right? Congestion, pollution, not enough space for parks and all that. How do you specifically see your role in that area as a city? I mean, is that something that you see relevant? And secondly, what specifically are you doing to solve these issues with more and more people moving into cities and really want to be mobile?
So that would be a great question that I think we can really have everyone participate, probably starting from the largest scale of Shanghai, trying to scale it down. And then the next question, sir.
I liked and I'm fascinated by this concept of urban innovation pocket. I understand that it means that some rules or regulations within that pocket are different, are relaxed, are taken away so that new things can happen. What if we would try this in Europe? And maybe, just an add-on to the idea, typically innovations within the European Union are initiated in 3 countries to ensure multinationality and multiculturality from the beginning. Could we sort of make a fusion of this? Because I believe these innovation pockets, or you could call it something like a free trade zone of ideas, concepts, digital ones or not. Could that be an idea for Europe, where we could sort of, in our European way, innovate?
I think it's a great question to finish, because then we're going to ask, can we run it in Lisbon, in Finland, and in Vienna, right? And we already have our pilot. So from the first question of the gentleman on mobility, which is a question that is important. So congestion, mobility, traffic, these are to some extent, they're social diseases, so to say, right? So Lulu, your experience in Shanghai, where I think the scale is significant, and then we'll try to go to each one of the panel.
Thank you. So Shanghai is a very different scale from a lot of these cities that we're talking about. When we talk about traffic, congestion, everything that is there, we're really thinking about, 30 million people that it's moving every day, right? So, for instance, the topic of driverless cars right now, I don't think it's a technological question. It's more of a moral question. What happens if, let's say, you put a driverless car with certain technologies in a certain area? What happens? How do they dodge? If the AI has to make a decision to turn left or right, and there's someone biking with a helmet, or there's someone who's biking without a helmet, as an example, which way do you go for? So a lot of these tricky questions, I think, that China and Shanghai and every single city is battling with. What I see in Shanghai, the government has really been trying to control traffic in different ways. As in, you can buy a car as a citizen, but you don't have a license plate. You'll have to go into a license plate lottery, and that's a different story, right? So you can have a car, but this is how they control traffic congestion, and it is real. Another way is certain cars that are older than X year are not even allowed to drive in the city, certain areas. So area 1, 2, 3, and they're really divided per how sustainable your car is, which is also a very interesting concept to this. Surveillance cameras are everywhere. Population that is otherwise very hard to control, and education levels are very different. You have surveillance cameras in a way that when, a couple of years ago, the government decided to enforce traffic rules, they were very serious about everything. So jail walking, everything, right? So I would say that, from my perspective, living, in Shanghai, governments are taking serious steps to really try to focus on this.
Quite interesting on your question how deterministic this approach is, and we tend to think about having a car being a right, but we forget that the individual right is colliding against the collective benefit. Yeah. And therefore, I think it's interesting to see this from cities where this is coming from the government. So, Luís, in Australia, in your borough, congestion, traffic, what's your strategy? Is there anything you can share with us? Is it a random process?
Well, I think traffic is something that is common to every modern city, and it's actually a cultural, but also a result of the industrial society that we developed into. And again, I have to mention in cities and the need that the third pillar is all about urban architecture. What if we started shifting the way that we organize our cities and our planning, so that infrastructures are planned in the concept of walking distance? Mm-hmm. This is the shift that we have to promote within our own cities. Mm-hmm. Of course, you can't raise cities to the ground and rebuild them. So what you have to do is, for the next 20 to 30 years, you have to start looking at the city and start shifting the way that you authorize businesses to emerge. Places, you don't want to control businesses, you want to control the places where they develop. You want to know where people can live with adequate quality of life and in walking distance from where they work. Where they can actually also have some cultural gains, where they can relax. All of this is part of thinking sentient and allowing urban architecture to be influenced by the need that humans have to move around. And this is the issue, I think. Mm-hmm. Of course, nowadays with smart cities, you have sensors. You start saying, well, in the end, if you give cars to people, people will do traffic. And that is the issue.
Very interesting. So as I have to be the back cop and trying to bring our conversation to closure with Wolfgang and Mikko, if you can maybe help us on the interesting idea about trying innovation in the urban, so like pocket model. What are your thoughts on this? How could we think about testing new innovative model?
In on that one too.
That's why I know. So, Wolfgang, any idea about how would you think a city like Vienna could possibly think about testing innovation like this, the idea of the urban pocket, and then we're going to try to see from the framework in Finland.
I think it's an excellent idea. Because we have to test it. We have to test everything. Within the European Union, it's done on a smaller scale. In specific common problems, for instance, what shall we do against the terrorist threat for the public spaces? There is done, working together, because nobody has a solution. Some ideas, some solutions, and there we are searching for opportunities and solutions. But it could be very inspiring.
Good. So we have one person on board with the idea.
I fully support the idea. I think it's definitely makes sense for cities to kind of join forces here and make it more systematic kind of learning from each other and leveraging best practices. I think it's a no-brainer that we would all benefit from that in a great way. One additional point on this congestion thing, I think, which is just, I think, of course, Finland and Helsinki, we don't really have a congestion problem compared to Shanghai, but I think time will take partly care of this, because it's interesting that at least in Finland we can start to see that the millennials are not interested they don't want to have a driver's license anymore, they want public services. They are interested, of course, urban planning have to be done make it comfortable and easy for them, but their values are such that they don't want to pollute. They want public transportation. They are happy to do. It's cool not to have a driver's license and pollute. So I think it's clearly we can see values changing in this respect.
So I have to finish our session, but if you guys would like to stay behind and talk to us, pleasure with. So one more time, the opportunity that we had today of Lulu from Shanghai, Luís from Lisbon, Wolfgang from Vienna, and Mikko from Finland. And we want to say thank you for our speaker for this wonderful panel.